Good afternoon and welcome to this week's edition of RCB Radio Sports Show, live at 92.5 and 94.8 FM and online at www.rcb.ie. My name is Jim Conlan and I'm joined this evening by RCB studio and analyst Nicholas Rynne, renowned sports journalist Seamus and our special guest this evening, Clare senior ladies football manager Evan Talty. This week's show will feature on the fortunes of both our men's footballers and our ladies footballers as we look ahead to the opening rounds of the league campaigns in both fortunes for the Clare's Colm Collins' Charges, who are drawn in Group 2A of the Allianz Football League. They will play against Kildare, Laois and Cork. And for Evan Talty's ladies football Charges, they're drawn against Wexford, Kerry and Meath. Clare in the Allianz Football League in Division 2, they will have two home games, one against Laois and the final game against Cork is at home, and sandwich in the middle, their way to Kildare. For Evan Talty's Charges, they start off with their home to Kildare. They play Kerry then away and they play Meath away. But first of all, we're going to start with you, Seamus, and looking back, I suppose, on 2020 first for Colm Collins and Clare football. I suppose one that bred an awful lot of optimism once we saw the draw for the championship, and obviously then it was a mixed bag in the league. We could have gone up, we could have gone down. We were in contention in both for the last day. But in fairness, the season sort of petaled out in a whimper in terms of below and Thurles.
Yeah, that's right, Jim. I suppose that was the disappointing result of the season. I still believe myself that the exertions of the previous two weekends against the two northern teams, Fermanagh and Armagh, I think that took its toll going into the championship, because there was an awful lot to play for in those league games. And as you rightly said, I think it was with less than 5 minutes to go in the second of those league games, Clare were on the way to Division 1. You know, as it was a great achievement to retain Division 2 status, because over the since Clare gained Division 2 status 4 or 5 years ago, they have been listed by the so-called experts every year for a return back down the line to Division 3, and they have defied all the odds and deservingly held their place. But as you say, that was a great achievement. There was a lot of delight amongst football supporters around the county, but the disappointment of losing to Tipperary a week later, I suppose, kind of knocked the loss off the season, if you like, because, you know, there was a great chance of being in the Munster final. And as we saw, who's to say that Clare would not have been crowned Munster champions, because, you know, Tip were super in the final. They upset the favourites Cork, and Clare would have held no fears going in against Cork either. So from that point of view, it was disappointing. But, you know, it's water under the bridge now, and the focus has to be straight away on the league and the resumption of league. And again, I see some so-called seasoned journalists yesterday predicting that he didn't even mention Clare, but that Kerry and Tip will meet in the Munster semi-final in the championship after the draw was made. So I suppose the pressure is on Clare again, if you like. They will be underdogs, but Colm has revelled in that role with the team. They were back in training, collective training last night, and, you know, all the focus is on the Laois game, which is the opening league game on the 16th of May. You know, and Clare have every reason to be confident that they will again retain their Division 2 status. And I think the focus has to be on the league at the moment, and hopefully that the games and the experience they'll gain in those three games will build them up for a right crack at Kerry in the championship.
And I suppose, Seamus, we saw maybe 2 or 3 years ago, Colm Collins had to do a mini sort of rebuild. He brought in the likes of Killian Brennan. He brought in the likes of Conal O'Hanifin. He blooded 1 or 2 players in that sort of season when many people were thought Clare would struggle without absentees, and he sort of reinvented the wheel. He's going to have to do something similar this year, you imagine, with the likes of Gary Brennan gone and with the likes of Gordon Kelly gone. There's going to have to be an influx again, an injection into the team. Could this be trickier this time around?
It's going to be difficult because the 2 players that you mentioned there, Gary Brennan and Gordon Kelly have been outstanding servants of Clare football over the past decade or the past 12 or 13 years. And it's going to be a huge, huge task to replace those two guys. You know, they have been ever present. They have they've never failed but to deliver for Clare. And they have been filling two key positions: centre back for the most time by Gordon, midfield for the most time by Gary, although he often moved in around the forward line. But the absence of those two is a huge blow, and it's going to take a bit of time to replace those, if you like, and get things going. Now there are a lot of good young fellas coming in. You know, the fellas that have impressed in the last year or two. I'm looking at, you know, talking about fellas like Daniel Welch in particular from Kilmurray or Bricken. He has been, you know, hugely impressive over the last year and a half. But these guys, you know, it's a different ball game when you step into the inter-county arena, and they'll be coming up against wily individuals with lots of experience. You know, and while these fellas are great footballers, it's going to take a bit of time to settle in to what's needed at senior level. So it will be hard to replace Gary and Gordon Kelly. The only thing I suppose is that you know, it's not happening without having a bit of notice. Colin has known for a while that this is going to be the case. The two lads had given plenty of notice that they were stepping back from the inter-county, and you know, they have graced the inter-county season superbly over during their time, but it's going to be hard to replace them.
I suppose if I can come to you, Nicholas, as well, it's important to note there's another departure as well. Aaron Fitzgerald has joined the hurlers. But in terms of positive, looking forward to, Podge Collins joined the footballers, and I suppose last year, and Podge had a really splendid campaign in Cracklow's march to the county final, where they came up short against Kilmurray or Bricken. But we probably didn't really get to see the best in Podge last year in terms of Clare sort of football. He came into the scene rather sort of late as such. We're probably going to see Podge Collins now, I imagine, from the start this time around in terms of the league campaign, and probably playing a prominent role in the forwards. Is that going to add another dimension to Clare's creativity in attack?
Oh, I'm sure it is, and I suppose the great thing about Podge this year, from football point of view, is he won't be involved with the hurlers, so he can throw his full attention into the football now, which I think is very important. It's very hard to balance both games and you both camps, like, so, you know, having a fully fit Podge and, you know, concentrating solely on football has to be a massive bonus after the loss of the two great lads that are settling down. I mean, it'll be unusual now to see a Clare team without Gary Brennan or Gordon Kelly's name on it. So there's almost no look for those two absentees, which it's great. Then the plus side is that you have Podge now, and he'd be champion at the bit, I'm sure, to add a bit of spice in there in the forwards, you know.
And I suppose, Nicholas, it's important to note as well in terms of underage development. In the last few years, we've seen a clutter of lads coming on from successful minor teams onto the Clare panel, coming off minor campaigns in terms of like Killian Rowan, Emmett McMahon, Gavin Cooney. This year now, it's been confirmed that like Mihal, Gary, Owen Rowan have gone into the senior panel. Derek Keneally, who was full back in 2018, he's gone into the senior panel as well. So these boys are coming in off really good, stellar underage campaigns where they've probably should have gone up against the best in the country and held their own as well. So they're coming in awful young, and I suppose with no fear as well. And these guys have proven that they can handle it with the best their own age in the country as well. So they're not coming in to make up the numbers either.
Oh, you can be sure they're not coming in to make up the numbers, and I suppose that's exactly it. You have Gary and Gordon, the individual for two great players, but there's young players coming in, and as you rightly say, they're coming in with lots of experience at minors. You know, getting those Munster finals, okay, we got beaten by superior Kerry teams, but that experience of getting to Munster finals and playing the Munster finals, I mean, you can't buy that for underage players, like, and they know what they'll be up against, and I'm sure they're, you know, working on those strengths, and they've had great victories, and that's what it's all about, and you know, Colin Collins would be delighted to take these players into the panel now and to move on, rebuild a little. He's going to have to do a little bit of rebuilding, obviously, But he's maintained the Division 2 status, got in, I think, 5 years ago, as Seamus said. And I mean, to stay up in Division 2 for 5 consecutive years for the Clare footballers is massive experience, playing against top-notch teams, you know, compared to when we were, you know, down in Division 4 and trying to get out of it. Now we're playing, you know, our game is getting better because of the opposition we're facing, and you know, that bodes well, and it's great to hear to say Kerry are in the semi-final already. So you know, let the press talk about that while we can work away. I'm sure Conlan will be working away quietly in the lads, you know, and I no doubt that it is about the league starting off, but I'm sure they're not going down just to play Kerry in it just for the spin, like, you know.
Yeah, I suppose if I can come to you, Evan, in terms of Clare football, you've been there in terms of Kilmurray Bricken in their great days, in reaching Munster club finals, in reaching sort of county titles on the trot. You've soldiered with Enda Conlan for several years. You know him well. I suppose Enda is probably speaking to Colm lately, and obviously knowing Enda as well. They still have great enthusiasm about the project Clare going forward. It's not all doom and gloom. They really see bright aspects of this project going forward.
Yeah, I think myself and Enda speak regularly about football most days, and I think never. I think with Colm, like, he just brings that calmness and stability, and you know, there's no panic with him. So, like, Colm is a shrewd operator. Colm just doesn't plan for the National League this year. Colm has been planning with 2-3 years, working with Mikey Nealon and Dermot Conlan, and on a good pathway to bring players through that are ready to step up once they come out of under 20. So while there's a big gap to fill, losing Gordon and Gary and some of the players that have gone on, I've no doubt that Colm might just tweak his system a little to facilitate other players in the roles and maybe slot in someone else there, centre back instead of Gordon. And obviously Gary was away as well for a bit last year, so he probably had been working on something to fill that role anyway. So look, for me, I think the Clare footballers are punching above their weight with a long time, and that's down to Colm Collins's strategic planning well in advance of competitions. And I've no doubt Colm has been doing a lot of hard work over the last couple of months in lockdown, getting his plans together for the league.
Yeah, and I suppose, Evan, we've mentioned some of the players there. We've seen an influx of youngsters in Kilmurray Bricken as well, the likes of Daniel Walsh, Dermot Conlan, obviously misfortune, being blessed with some horrific injuries of late in terms of his career going forward with Clare as well. But some of these guys now are really beginning to step up as the primary sort of scorers for Clare. It's not all David Tuberty, Owen Cleary having to sort of shoot the lights out. When you look at the Clare forwards, what you could have on display, you look like Joe McGann, you look like Jamie Malone, Emmett McMahon, Podge Collins, we said, Tuberty's. There's an array of options there in terms of score getting and score taking as well. Like, so Clare, most times Clare in the past few years, you would say, well, David needs to hit 9 or 10 points, or 7 of those would have to come from frees or something like that for Clare to be in with the game. That's not really the case anymore. Clare can really chalk down 6 or 7 scores most days in Division 2 per game.
Yeah, well, I think, like, if you look at Clare, probably they're shooting in the last 2 to 3 years. Clare's shot efficiency is not far off the Dubs. Clare are probably getting away 16, 17 shots and probably scoring 10 or 11 points. And you're probably heavily reliant on Owen Cleary and David Tuberty with the last couple of years, but I would say that with the loss of Gordon and Gary, they'll probably need to play a bit more expensive this year. And looking at, what you're probably looking at is Keelan to step up this year and play a leadership role. He's there a long time now, and probably bring his Kilmurray form. We would rely heavily on Keelan and Kilmurray, but I think Clare, they have a more even spread of players. But where I can see them doing a lot more damage is coming from the half forward line and midfield, and even the half back line, the likes of Keane O'Dea and these lads that are coming forward to chip in with scores. But I think if they play a more attacking brand of football and get more shots away, they should have no problem clocking up a few scores. but the provision on that is like it's not easy to replace the scores from Owen Cleary and from David. Like it takes a year or two for these young lads to get accustomed with inter-county football. And even I seen that, like even at club level, Danny Walsh came in 2 years ago. We got to the county final, and I think he really stepped it up another notch this year once he was settled in the team and was comfortable. And that's where I would think Colin would have the challenge. And I think he needs to probably blood a couple of players in the league and give them the chance and sacrifice maybe a league semi-final for just staying up, but find another 2 or 3 forwards that can probably chip in on the way in the league.
Yeah, and I suppose, Seamus, if I can come back to you and we look at the league a section there as well, Clare being drawn with Laois, Kildare and Cork. If I can put it to you, Seamus, in terms of the fixtures, is that really, when you look at the other side, is that the easier side of it? When you look at the other side, when you look at Meath, Mayo, Down, Westmeath, we could have been featuring away games maybe at Mayo, Down. We know our luck with Meath, and if Colin could have picked 2 sides, I imagine this is probably the one he would have picked. Clare, Laois, Kildare and Cork, 2 home games against Laois and Cork and 1 away at Kildare. It doesn't look as daunting as, say, the other side of the group in terms of maybe playing Mayo at home and then away trips to maybe Meath or Down, for example.
Yes, Jim. On paper, it looks that way. It looks as if this is more attractive side of that league, I suppose. And Clare have no reason to have any fears against the teams that they're playing, like Laois, Kildare, and Cork. You know, they have a good record against those teams in modern times. And you know, it's only a few years ago since they beat Kildare to win the Division 3 league title. They have done very well against Cork in modern times. Cork will probably be still hurting from their Munster final defeat last year, and you know they are pushing hard to get back up the ladder, and they will be seen as favourites, and they'll want to be seen as as a strong, settled team. But I would say that all the Clare people, supporters, and those involved would be quite happy with the opposition that they have now. The danger in that is that somebody might try and take it for granted, because you can't take anything for granted. But you know they're going to be tough opposition, because all the Laois and Kildare with Jack O'Connor, they were disappointed last year that they didn't maybe progress further, and they would hope to be a step better organised, if you like, this year. Ronan McCarthy has been pushing hard in Cork, and having got back up to Division 2 after a big effort. They will want to consolidate their position there and make further progress. So it's still going to be tough. But I agree with you. It sounds more appealing, it looks more appealing to be playing these teams than to be heading off to Mayo and Meath and Down. Because those counties have always had strong, experienced teams, and our record maybe against them isn't maybe as good as it is against the three teams that we'll be meeting. But we can't take anything for granted. That's the warning shot I would be firing, that Clare have to be prepared for all opponents. And right now, I think their focus has to be on the opening round against Laois. It won't be easy. Mick Quirk is in charge of Laois for the second year, and obviously he has designs on them being a force. So it's going to be tough, but Clare have had the better of games with Laois in modern times. So, I think they have every reason to look forward with confidence to their 3 league games.
I suppose, Seamus, if I can come to another point as well, it's important to mention that Brian Carson has stepped away from the Clare Senior Football Panel. They have a new coach on board. He's a Sligo man. He was in charge of Turnerstone. I think they did 7 in a row above in Sligo, in the Sligo Senior Football sort of championship. So for a new coach coming in, and obviously he's probably only at 1 or 2 sort of sessions, he hasn't got to see his team playing an inter-county challenge. He's relying on in-house games. You mentioned there, Laois, they probably have the same backroom team, I imagine, as last year as well. Obviously, new coach brings new ideas, brings new probably game plan or style or a vision that he's used to playing as well. And in terms of adapting to the sort of players, does that really take time to sort of get it down and sorted and get it adjusted? And do Clare have the time really in terms of this new coach coming in, given that the league is only right around the corner and we all know there's a ban on inter-county challenge games until May the 5th?
Yeah, I suppose it takes time. Yeah, you're right. You're right on that. But I think that the plus Clare have, while Jerry McGowan is finding his feet, if you like, and I think he has had a few Zoom meetings with the panel. But I think that the plus that they have is that they have, in addition to Cullum, they have Enda Coughlin and Declan Downs, and those three have been there for the last number of years. They know the scene well. The respect that the players have for those is superb. And there are a few players in this county with the experience from when he was playing to coaching better than in the Coughlin. And he knows the scene backwards. The players have huge time for him, so he will have the players along with Cullum and Declan. They will have the players well tuned in for when Jerry McGowan comes in, and I presume Jerry will be trying to impact his knowledge as well. And as you say, that'll probably take a bit of time, but the plus is that the lads are there and that the lads know the scene, and they have been in regular communication with the players, and they have put them through a lot of their paces over the last couple of years. So I think, I think the transition will be, if you like, easy enough from that point of view.
I suppose, Nicholas, if we look at last year, Clare were practically in every single game. The ones they lost, they were in. The ones that they won, probably opposition were in. And maybe some moments along the way in terms of learning experience and maturity cost Clare. I'm just remembering back to Kieran Russell's red card in injury time, and he was not available for the Laois game afterwards. And I suppose some of these players now, in terms of maturity, the senior top players, Clare can't really afford that anymore now. They're down two elder statesmen in Gary, they're down Gordon as well. So it's an onus for Clare that obviously with the short campaign picking up injuries as well, that you just can't afford these sort of things, like players picking up red cards, getting involved in silly, awkward things. It's the team really that suffers the most, because these sort of players that we saw, the likes of Kieran Russell, they're very hard to replace when they're not available.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Discipline now is the big thing in any sport, and you just won't get away with stuff that you might have got away with maybe 10 years ago. It just doesn't happen now. They're picking up everything, and you just have to, that discipline has to be there. And I suppose on a couple of occasions it was lacking a bit, and unfortunately, but your opening question was they're competing, and the games that they lost very narrowly. So, and I think, since they've gone up to Division 2, they've competed. And we've had great days, against Westmeath, against Roscommon, against top teams, and nobody wants to see Clare coming now in the league, because they know Clare are a team to be bargained with. And under Colin Collins, he's highly rated manager, he's highly rated players, and but discipline is, every team has to have discipline, you can't afford to be sent off in the game. But it happens sometimes. It's rough justice too, but it happens, and the way it is now, it's so easy to be sent off. I know it's easy to point the finger at a player you shouldn't be sent off, but it's just so easy now to pick up 2 yellow cards. For me, this black card as well, it's just so easy to be leaving the field. It cost me, RCB in All Ireland a few years ago. A simple thing. So, and they don't seem to be terrible fouls, that's nothing like we used to see in the old days. And yet, there's a huge penalty now. And if you're down a man in a game of football, it's a serious drawback, obviously. So, it's just have to watch that. But I go back to it. We're gaining experience. We can cut it with the best teams. We're right up there. I haven't seen us being beaten. The game against Tipperary last year, and I suppose Seamus rightly pointed out, I think it came at the wrong time for us as well. And it was just the day didn't go right that day against Tipperary. And you, as the song goes, there'll be days like that. But I'm looking forward, and Seamus rightly pointed out, we can beat Kildare, Cork and Laois. I suppose if we were to pick 3 teams that we can beat, they're the 3 teams. That's.
And I suppose
it's also clever.
And I suppose, Nicholas, last question for you now in terms of this. We suppose Gary Brennan has stepped away from the panel. We know last year as well, Cahill O'Connor, in terms of his influence, he was still very influential, but he wasn't finishing out games in terms of that. he was maybe lasting maybe 10 minutes into the second half, putting in a great sort of shift, and maybe then Clare were going to the bench. This year around now, I suppose, obviously it's expected that Kieran Russell will move back into the sort of midfield role, and people are looking and said to Clare, like in terms of underage teams, they're producing backs are coming through in terms of Dara Keneally, Micheál Gary, for example. Forwards are coming through, and the likes of Killian Moran and Emmett. But is there a shortage area in that midfield? You've seen Cullum try one or two options there, and it hasn't really worked out for him in the past. And what you think is the solution there if we're without Cahill or we're without Kieran, or if Cahill has to come off with around 15 or 20 minutes to go? Where is the solution for Clare in terms of that? Do you see a ready-made solution? Could we see Jamie Malone actually be moved out to the middle of the park?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a few options. Like, I mean, Gary Brennan was probably the best player he's a player in a lifetime. And you know, I remember being up in Westmeath the day they played Westmeath, and that was a very important game. And I'll never forget the ball he caught it just near the end of the game. You know, to practically won the game for Clare. But he's done that right through his career. And to ask a man to fill those boots, like, is a huge job. You know, but Kieran Russell is a good player, and he's a good solid man and very strong, like, you know. And I know Colm Collins will be trying lads in that position as well, like. And there's a few of the younger players coming in that are strong, physically strong as well. And maybe he'll give them a run and see, you know. But I can't second guess, and I'm not really qualified to say who will fill the midfield position. But big boots to fill, obviously. And you know, I'm sure he knows himself. Colin knows himself, and he certainly hasn't taught me anyway yet. But you know, I'm looking forward to seeing. There's great guts in that team, and there's great players in that team. But I the same as the hurling. I always look forward to when the young players coming out of minor, coming out of under 21, under 20 now. I always look forward to seeing them players. To see, you know, you mightn't have seen what they can do in minor as much either, because they're just coming into being adult players then. So I'm looking forward to a few of them lads stepping up now and seeing what they have, and the league is a great place to see that.
I suppose, Evan, in terms of the panel, we all know that in the past few years, maybe that was the case raised against Clare come league days. When you look at the respective benches that maybe Clare come kick-off time or coming down the home stretch, maybe they could only have one or two options to bring in to a fray to change a game. Do you see a gradual sort of change in that process? Do you think Cullum now has really 5 lads that he can call on, maybe 2 backs, maybe 3 forwards, that he can come in and can make a difference in a game? Do you think Clare are operating with a 20-man panel come match day? I know a few years ago we'd like to Shawnee McGrath in terms of Dublin, we'd a few others, but do you think we're back to that strength? Do you think Cullum is not really dependent on 17, 18 lads anymore?
Yeah, I think the one thing that's been really consistent throughout Cullum's tenure is he trusts the players that he has. So his panel has been quite consistent, and I suppose his top 17 or 18 players hasn't really changed, but he tries then to bring in maybe 5 or 6 new lads on the panel, blood them for a year, and then hopefully see the best of them then in year 2 and 3. And that, you know, I think the likes of Gerard O'Brien, who's been in and around the setup now, he's just starting to come into his own, and he's probably there 3 or 4 years. Like you'll see Joe McGann probably step up this year, and a few of the lads that they've brought in from an assignment as well, who have been really good underage players. The Rewinds there, I'd be expecting 1 or 2 of them to push for a place as well. So, like I think like what Cullum does have is he doesn't have, I suppose, a huge, we'll say, brilliant 15 players and a huge drop off. Then he's a really consistent 23 or 4, and there's, you know, you look at there the likes of Kildysert, St. Brecken's, Innistymen, Erogue. they're all producing good young players. Mark McInerney, we played them this year now. They've Mark McInerney, Gavin Cooney, Ickham is there. You go up to the Spa and they have the likes of Joe McGann, they have Aidan Davidson. They have a couple of more. Dale Masterson is on the panel there with a year or two. So, like, I genuinely haven't seen him up close this year. And even going to Lissy Casey, we played Lissy Casey this year, and I don't know if he's on the panel, but Aaron Griffin has been, anytime we've played him, Aaron Griffin has been an awful handful for us. Very, very good eye for goal, and there, what we have is a lot of exciting, fast, knacky inside forwards, which we probably haven't been producing for a while. So I'd love to see him. Like, there's a huge, you can't, like, even talking to Danny and them, like, you can't underestimate the step up from club level going into an inter-county setup, the physicality of meeting lads who have 7-8 years of strength and conditioning behind them and coming in a year after your club team at 19, 20 is a massive, and Cullum is really, really good at managing the step up. He doesn't throw lads in. He gives them their time to find their feet. He did it with the likes of Killian Brennan and them, and they're all the better for it. They for a couple of years of experience on the panel. So, no, look, as I said before, Cullum is a really shrewd operator. He knows how to build the panel to stay in Division 2, and I've no doubt Clare will do that this year.
Yeah, and I suppose, Evan, lastly, in terms of that, you mentioned there about the strength of the panel for Clare and going forward as well. And when you know from being a club player as well, in terms of committing to the sort of inter-county scene, you're probably looking ahead, you're probably looking at sort of championship, you're waiting for that sort of draw in terms of you're saying to yourself, well, is it worth the long sort of commitment? Do you think secretly deep down there'll be a bit of some lads who were maybe half thinking of maybe stepping away, who decided to stay on? Do you think seeing that draw against Kerry that might dishearten them a bit in terms of maybe rethinking about where their future sort of lies?
I don't think so, Jim. I think, look at, there's, at some stage you have to beat Kerry or Cork to win the Munster. So whether you meet them in round one or you meet them in Munster finals, which we've done before and got a hockey off them, I don't think that plays into the players' minds. At the end of the day, I think, like, for Clare, the league is probably more important because it's the more realistic thing we have a chance of success in, and it's the thing that we've actually gained success in the last couple of years, getting to Croke Park. And while the format straight knockout this year is not conducive to I suppose teams like Clare, what we would have been looking at is having a good run in the Super 8s or stack to get there. That's what Cullum would have been looking at before COVID hit. Like, but I don't like being an inter-county player now is a lifestyle choice rather than just a sporting choice. Like, from the minute they wake up in the morning, they're thinking about what they're eating. They've gym work. Like, the Clare footballers are training, they've 3 nights a week on the pitch, 2 nights a week in the gym, and they've been doing that right the way through. So it's actually, it becomes ingrained in them. And I don't know if you ever talk to Gordon Kelly or listen to his interviews, you know, it was actually a way of life for them. And it's that's what it is. So I don't think you're not going to have a mass exodus off the panel because they drew Kerry. Clare will be thinking of the National League and the first round of the National League and trying to get a couple of wins on the board. And like, you have to look at it. I personally thought last year Clare were a better team than Cork, and Cork caught Kerry, and Clare probably had an off day against Tip. Like, so Kerry are a wounded animal, but they're not in a great space, and their confidence should be fairly low after last year's debacle below in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. So, like, Cullum he'll have his eye on Kerry, like, and he knows them well. We've met him enough times now to know that we can actually be competitive against Kerry. And on the way things are going with COVID, there's some crazy things happening in the championship. So why not Clare?
And I suppose, Seamus, lastly, the last question to finish off the preview of the Allianz Football League. And I suppose this is a question now, I suppose, I don't want to ask it, but I feel sort of obliged in my sort of role to have asked it. We saw the announcement, well, not the announcement, that probably one of the best minor footballers Clare produced in the last maybe 20, 30 years has joined the hurling panel, and obviously not available to the footballers in terms of the elusive talent that is Shane Meehan. How much of, when we hear the news of Gary Brennan stepping aside in a way, in terms of probably one of the best players Clare produced maybe in the last minor, I know personally how good he is, but the last 30 years, how big of a loss is that going forward for the long-term project of Clare football?
Yeah, well, it's disappointing. It's disappointing, as was for football followers and for people who are involved in coaching in various levels in football, because he is a talent, and he's I suppose a rare talent, if you like, in terms of what we've seen him deliver at underage level with Clare, and in terms of the role he's playing with his club, the Banner, at the moment, who are in the Junior A football final, and they've made great strides, and he's been key, one of the key ingredients in that. So it is a disappointment, but I suppose Evan mentioned there about, that COVID has led to a lot of huge changes, and I suppose that's one of them. There isn't a way at the moment for the player to focus on the June commitment. It was getting difficult anyhow, but since the COVID pandemic hit, it's practically impossible, because the games are going to be on the same weekend. You're going to have the Clare hurlers and Clare footballers playing most of their programme this year on the same weekends, and the same with all the other counties. So from that point of view, it would be impossible. But for football followers throughout the county, there was a sense of longing to see him step up to the senior grade and see how he'd play against the talented players, from other counties, and see how he'd progress. So, I've no doubt that's a loss, and football players are disappointed at that. But maybe down the road that it might work out, that he'd make himself available for football. If things don't work out for hurling, or maybe when things open up again, and that there might be more time between the hurling and football fixtures, that it might allow him the opportunity, because it would be a pity if he's lost to inter-county football at that level, because he is a very, very talented and skillful player.
That concludes the first part of this week's RCB show, as RCB Radio Sports show, as we look ahead to Colm Collins' charges in their respective Allianz League football campaign. They kick off on May the 15th, the weekend of May 15th, 16th. They're home to Laois. They're away in the following weekend, May the 22nd to 23rd against Kildare. And finally, to round off the first part of the league game, depending how they get on, they're May the 29th and 30th, they play Cork at home. And depending on results will determine where Clare will be involved in maybe relegation or promotion or mid-table security. But best of luck to Colm Collins and all the Clare footballers, what hopefully be a productive Allianz League Division 2 campaign. Welcome back to this special edition of RCB Radio Sports Show, live at 92.5 and 94.8 FM and online at www.rcb, as we look ahead to the opening rounds of the Allianz Football Leagues for both the men's and ladies' Clare inter-county football teams. This part of the segment, I'm delighted to be joined by the new Clare ladies football manager, taking over from James Murray. He guided Kilmurray Bricken ladies football team back to the senior ranks of Clare football. Evan Talty. Evan, I suppose first of all, I got to ask you, when you heard about the opportunity, when you heard James was stepping down, did it feel like a natural fit for you straight away to jump into the hot seat and take this new challenge on?
Definitely not, Jim. It was probably the last thing I thought about, being honest about it, because I actually got a taste for management in the ladies and with Kilmurray, and I didn't realise how much was involved in management. I was just used to picking up the boots and going training, but I suppose we had a bit of Inda was with me with Kilmurray, and he had a bit of experience from Clare, and we kind of figured it out and winged it as we went along. But it was I played a very small role last year in the background with James, just giving him a hand. And being honest about it, if you were part of it, it would have definitely scared me, because I've seen the amount of time and effort James was putting in. It's a full-time job, and 'tis the same from I'd often meet Colin Collins and Innes and around the town there, and the amount of time he'd spend on the phone. So I didn't think it was for me. But I suppose as things went on, and the year got short, and the uncertainty around COVID, I suppose the county board felt that it was very important that there was a bit of continuity kept from last year's management team to this year, because a new manager coming in wouldn't get time to have trials or meet the girls or anything like that. So when Sean approached me, I suppose I said I think about it, and before I gave him any answer, I wanted to see could I get a backroom team together, because I knew how many people you need involved, I suppose, to run an inter-county setup. So I suppose starting in the end of January there, we probably started looking and spoke to a lot of different people. And, it was hard to get people because of COVID. And but I think we searched far and wide and tried to get the best people we could involved. And eventually we found a backroom team, and I went back to Sean and said that I'd be willing to take it on for this year.
And I suppose, Evan, I know from particular circumstances being involved with a county team, being involved with County Minor for 2 years, your own sort of football, myself and Sean Hawke, we're in the similar sort of boat. Your own sort of footballing aspirations go out the window in terms of that. Is that a similar case for you now in Kilmurray Brickin in terms of the senior team, in terms of pursuing that? Is that the commitment involved with the Clare senior ladies football team? Does that make it a non-runner for you?
I suppose we'll see. At the moment, I've ambitions of trying to play again this year. I suppose after winning the championship last year, it'll be. Everyone says you should go out in a high, but I suppose the hunger is probably still there in Kilmurray to keep going while we can. And we'll see. First and foremost, and I said this to the board, like my allegiance is to the Clare ladies, number one. And if there's any clashes or that, obviously the Clare ladies come first. So I would leave it in that if things pan out, great, I'll play. And if they don't pan out, that's fine too. So we've played enough of it at this stage, but it's just, I think when the grass is cut and the sun is shining and 7:30 comes, I can see the pitch down the road and the lads are out training. It's hard to stay away from it.
Yeah, and I suppose, Evan, if I can speak about the panel as such, in terms of James's panel, he was able to get in a few last year in terms of the COVID med, the likes of Chloe Maloney. We know she's a prominent soccer player. She was available. One or two others that probably had ideas of going travelling, stayed around the case sort of scenario. So in terms of the panel that you had last year, is very much everyone still on board in terms of this year. A few of the elder girls maybe step back. And obviously we had, in terms of the dual players last year, we know Nivo D had an absolute hectic schedule. It was a superhuman sort of schedule what she was sort of put through, and maybe Knox took her toll on her towards the end and sort of such. Have you many sort of dual players again, do you imagine?
Sure, we'll have Niamh and Shifra again, who are dual players. And look, as you said there, I suppose Niamh was being pulled from pillar to pole last year, looking to play 2 games in a week. And I think at 27 now, Niamh is, and the amount of length of time she's been on the road playing, it's not fair to ask that of any player. So between myself and Ger, I think we'll manage her as best we can to make sure that doesn't happen this year, and to try and give her the best chance to be injury free and probably see the best in Nivo D at both codes in 2021. That'll be my biggest thing. And the same, like Shifra is a good bit younger and she's a phenomenal athlete, and she probably didn't play as much in the camogie as she did in the football, so she wasn't as heavily loaded. But they're the 2 that we will have, and then there's a few of them playing junior camogie as well. But I suppose that's only that if it doesn't clash with the football, so it's not really an issue. But look, I wouldn't ever. I think it's completely up to the girls, whatever they decide to do. I'm happy for them to play both if they want.
And Evan, lastly for me, I suppose looking back at last year's campaign, I was at your game against Sligo and I was at the game against Meath, and I just thought to myself that emphatic victory that you had against Sligo probably didn't serve you any sort of justice going into Meath. It was a worthwhile sort of exercise. There was the gulf between Sligo and Meath was absolutely massive. But in terms of what I noticed about that game was Clare had so much of the ball, but they came up against a system against Meath that maybe forward play was the big thing. They weren't able to come up with ways to break down the Meath defence or open up spaces in terms of what was a well-oiled sort of machine. And I wouldn't regard Meath the way they played, because I actually thought it was so well done. It was actually good to watch it in terms of how well they were organised and how well they were drilled in terms of their movement up and down the field. Actually, it was a pleasure to watch it from. If you like to see how a team is set up defensively, it was very much to probably issue the Donegals that won the Ireland. It was that sort of good. Have you learned anything from that sort of last year in terms of taking forward this year, in case you meet something like that again? Because it really shocked the girls, I thought, last year a bit when they came up against it.
It did, Jim, and it shouldn't have, because I suppose Meath play like that with the last 3 years. And the thing about that is, and I agree with you, and any of my management team will tell you they're sick of me referring to Meath, but I felt that what Meath done really well is Meath found a system to suit their players, and Meath are an unbelievably athletic team, which means they can sit back and break from deep and get huge runners from 80, 90 yards. And they built a system to suit their team, and I have huge admiration for that Meath team, because what I like about them is they find a way to play, and they play that way. And I'm sure Seamus has seen enough of Kilmurray over the last 20 years or so to say that's what we would believe in as well, in that since we were under 12s, Kilmurray have never changed how they play. And I think that brings, you'll get beat sometimes, but the one thing that brings is if the players are familiar to the system. And it brings confidence, because you don't know anything else. Whereas if you're trying to go out and implement different game plans every day, you'll get caught between two stools. So I'm a big believer in the Meath way, the Kilmurray way of find a way that suits you and just be the best at playing the way that suits your team. Don't be anyone else. Figure out what players we have, what players we can play to their strengths with, and just keep playing that way. And it might win or lose, but at least the players will know what they're doing every day to go out.
If I come to you, Seamus, we mentioned about underage success in terms of the Clare men's team, but it's important to note that the Clare ladies football team in the last few years, I remember Joe Downs been heavily involved there in Court Clare, they've had a number of successes as well. So there is good young girls coming through in terms of 18 or 19. I remember we've seen Dora Bearfield there last year, Chloe Toy there, only 19, and she was a revelation in the senior sort of championship there, watching her. So there is promising young girls coming through. Flannan's Gary Brennan and Dara Kelly doing great things inside with the Flannan's ladies football teams competing at a high level as well. So there is really the underage systems in Clare ladies football have been really prominent as well, competing against the best.
Yeah, and that's very true, Jim. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. There's a lot of great work being done in the schools, and as you see, you mentioned Flannan's there with Gary and Darry Kelly and the lads down there, and Colostra have been going well with ladies football. Idel Camry has been involved there, and a few others, and most of the secondary schools now in the county compete in ladies football competitions, and that's. I'd have a great breeding ground, if you like, for county teams, and a lot of the girls come through that and onto the underage section. And one thing, the standard of ladies football is remarkably high. I saw some of the games in Clare last year, and then I saw the Munster Club game in Kilmaher between.
I was at that, yeah.
It was a different class, and coming out of the grounds that night, Tom Keane, the groundsman, said to me, "That's how football should be played." The pace of that game that night and the speed. Now, I know the straight pickup is a big help in comparison to the men's game, but the pace of the game that night, there were no questions asked. Whistle was blown, people just ran on and stepped to the next move. And the standard of ladies football has come on hugely in the past number of years. And I agree with what Evan said there. you develop a system and you play to that system. You develop it and you play to that system. And God knows my own club, Mr. Casey, have suffered against Kilmurray, his own club, several times, because every player on the Kilmurray team knows exactly where their teammates are. And if they get battled up or whatever, they have teammates coming from all sides ready to take a pass. And it takes a while, and you have to start people young maybe to get into that type of a system. And I'm delighted to hear him say, you play to your strengths, and that's what has to be done. And I'm sure that he'll bring a lot of that side with him and his management team into the Clare ladies scene this year. There's some great young players coming through, and they have the experienced players, the Nebodies and these people. And I'd be very confident that they're certainly going to be challenging strongly this year.
And I suppose you mentioned the club game in Clare, and I suppose we see that intermediate games, some of the teams are very evenly matched. Some of the intermediate teams could very well compete in the senior. But what was strong to me, that I noticed there being at the Clare's ladies club football, obviously the golf class that Banner had produced in the day. But then you saw the Banner didn't play Cara, and they were almost like an inter-county sort of team as well. Is there a case maybe that for in terms of the club game in sort of the Clare ladies football team, that teams will have to try and come up with new ways of trying to raise their game to the Banner? Or is it a case of Banner coming down a notch or two in terms of meeting the rest of the pack?
Well, I think that you have to aim for to raise your game to be at the level of the highest team that you could be playing against. And I think that's the, I suppose there aren't, if you had more clubs, and if you had clubs in every parish, maybe then the Banner mightn't have as strong a pick, if you like, as they have, because players come from other parishes who want to play ladies football. You have to encourage them in any sport. The more you can get playing it, the better. So from that point of view, but then again, was it 2 years ago? Kilmare had a team that won the championship, and Banner were hot favourites. And right now, having seen some of the games last year, I would have no hesitation in saying that either Kilmurray, who won the intermediate title, or Milton, who won the beat in the final, are capable of challenging the strong senior clubs that have there. They have players coming through, and Kilmurray will benefit enormously from the success of last year at intermediate level. They will probably have maybe a few more players trying to get into the team this year. And you need that. You need to get more players coming through. I suppose, like the Fergus Rovers, you need to get them back up there. The Scanner, they have maybe slipped a bit from their high point from a few years ago, but they're coming strong again at underage level, and maybe in a year or two that they might be in a strong position to challenge for honours at intermediate or senior level as well.
And Nicholas, if I can come to you, we know that some of the great ambassadors for Irish sport at the moment made their name in terms of Clare ladies football. Ailish Constantine, Emer Constantine, to name one or two. We have another girl from Kilmehel as well that was involved on the Clare rugby team as well. They're heavily involved with the Clare ladies as well. And Nicholas, just in relation to that, I suppose we look at some great ambassadors for Clare ladies football down through the years, like Laurie Ryan, Emer Keane. They're not really at the fold. And we mentioned the loss of Gary Brennan, and we mentioned the loss of Gordon Kelly and Aaron Fitzgerald. In terms of Clare ladies, it's the same really note. The loss of Ailish Constantine, loss of Emer Constantine, maybe Emer Keane and Laurie Ryan, great ambassadors for ladies football, serving out their careers as well.
Yeah, it's a them girls that you're saying, they're huge. They're a huge loss to ladies football. But having said that, they're for ladies sport in general, like to see, to be sitting here in my own sitting room and watch a rugby game and see a local girl that started off playing football for her club and for Clare, and to be going out there doing playing international, like. I mean that's a great for young girls who are joining sport now and joining ladies football especially now. They're great ambassadors. They are a loss when they move on and go up to that level. But that's great to see. It's great to see that they can get up the ladder and get into the playing international sport. They're two exceptional players. The Constantine sisters, absolutely. I was just looking at what her mother, the mother was talking there on a thing on Facebook there, and it was brilliant to see that lady sport, like Seamus hit on it there, lady sport is just taken off. And it's great. Camogie and football now are very skillful. They're at a very skillful level. Sometimes I watch those games and I wonder, is there actually more skills used in the ladies' game now than there is in the men's game, who are seen to be getting up another notch with physicality. And when you see maybe slow down a little tweak, you see a lot more skill in the ladies' side of things now. And you know, Evan is a brave man to take that job. I believe at COVID, at a time when COVID is, it must be almost impossible, not impossible, but it must be awfully difficult to be able to organise things. But I love to hear what he said. You know, in terms, if you can get him playing like Kilmurray or Brechin, he's definitely on a winner. Like obviously the way they play, and you know, it was when he said that they haven't changed their style over the last 10 years. They absolutely haven't. And for the men, I think he has 10 medals. He's going for he's number 11 this year, so it's great to hear that as well. I will see him out in the pitch again. And of course, they've no pitch back in Kilmurray or Brechin. It's looking great. I can see why he wants to get on that pitch as well. So, but he has a big job on his hands. You know, it's the management now is, as he said himself, it's a full-time job, and to manage in COVID must be, you know, there's so many things you have to do. Like even to call a meeting now, you know, you have to, so many things you have to look out for. So, you know, I wish Evan the very best, and if he does that, what he says, you know, the Kilmurray way certainly would be a great way going forward, and we look forward to seeing that later on in the year.
And I suppose last question from me to you, Nicholas. I know myself. I have a sister. She's 15. She's turning 16 in May, and she's just on to join the adult Fergus Rovers senior football panel sort of this year. But in terms of that, I'm just looking at the sort of age bracket in terms of when girls when they hit 16 being eligible for adult ladies, and we talk about the men's code now about 17 and 18-year-old lads being probably too young to play senior football, but we see what has been done in the ladies game, where it was the norm for 15 or 16 once girls turn 15 or 16 to go straight into adult teams. Do you think maybe by the time those girls are come 19 or 20 that they're really ready to play, they're more developed to play inter-county ladies football than maybe boys their age, because they've been playing adult club football for maybe 3 or 4 years at that stage?
Yeah, sure. It's a great plus to be able to come in as a young player and get onto a panel like this. You know, I suppose again it goes back to what I said already. There seems to be more focus on skill in the ladies in ladies sport than there is in the men's sport. The men's sport now is all about gyms and physicality, and it's all part of the game. It's great, but if you look at the Limerick hurlers and the Dublin football team, I mean, but they just got it. They have to win the battle in hurling. It's win the ruck now. It's almost so much a part of it. So when you sit back and watch a ladies game, I just see that there's more skill, more enjoyment to sit and watch those games. You know, for me, and that's why you can bring in your 16-year-old, because they're not going into a battle, they're going into a game of skill, and that's the way it should be. And I think they need to look at that in you know, in the men's side as well. Like, you know, to the 16 or 17-year-old, back in the day, Johnny Conlan, he was only 17 years of age when he played his first Munster Championship game, and there's more that just don't come to mind now, which it can't be done today.
And Seamus, I'll go to you before I finish with Evan. And in terms of the ladies sort of scene, in terms of we've seen Clare so many years reaching, they're probably knocking at that sort of intermediate sort of doorstep. I remember the last time they went up, I think they had Anya Kelly and Lorraine Kelly and a few more from that Fergus Rovers clan, Tony Kelly's older sort of sister as well. When Clare were up there, they sort of held their own and sort of such. Is that the case really we saw with the footballers when they went up the divisions, they were able to hold their own? Is that the case for Clare ladies football, you feel? It's just making that breakthrough, and once they get up, the likes of Tipperary have done, and Galway, they'll be able to progress a bit further.
Yeah, certainly they were a big force maybe back in the 80s and 90s. A lot of other counties maybe weren't putting much effort into ladies football back then. But there's so many counties doing well now. And, you know, you can see that whether you're watching the All-Ireland junior, intermediate or senior, they have all the grades, and teams are doing very well in each of those grades. You know, Clare, after a few lean years, are coming back strong again. You know, Evan mentioned there about James Murray here. Very, very well organised man, the way he organises and plans his management, you know, whether it be men or ladies teams he's involved with. You know, and I'm sure Evan will be in a similar vein. You know, they know what it's like to win. They equally know what's involved in putting structures in place so that you can challenge strongly, you know, and the experience that they have had from coming through their club, where Kilmurray have been very well organised, and there's scarcely a year that Kilmurray and winning something at some level, you know, and there's always young players coming through. We've seen that particularly in the last year or two. You know, a lot of the Kilmurray team that won the senior championship last year, you know, a lot of those have been there maybe 7 or 8 years now and have a bag full of medals. But each year they're bringing 2 or 3 new fellas through, and like, you know, Daniel Welch was one of those, Aidan McCaffrey, who's tied up with intercounty hurlers, I suppose, at the moment, that type of thing. And I'm sure the same thing is beginning to happen now in ladies football. And while the likes of Nivo D and Schiffer and O'Connell and these girls, you know, will be leaders for Evan's team this year, I'm sure he'll have a few new players who will be coming into the senior to the intercounty setup with his team for the first time this year. So he'll have the mix right. It is important to have young players coming through all the time. And, you know, I'd be very confident that in the next year or two, Clare will move a couple of more rungs up the ladder, moving towards the top again.
And I suppose, Evan, we mentioned there about the female element. It's a female game as well. Do you have maybe a strong sort of female voice in your backroom team to relate to the sort of young girls coming through as well? Obviously, maybe say those sort of words that maybe you or the men's side of the game that you probably need a sort of female sort of touch to relate to. Have you someone in that backroom that maybe the girls can relate to or respect?
Yeah, I think I thought it was vitally important to get female influence into the squad, because it's from, you know, I just feel that girls respond well to that. So I have 4. So I have, I brought in Orna McKenna, who is from the same club as Vicky Wall and Emma Duggan in Meath. She's from Dunboyne. I think she won an All-Ireland minor with Meath. So Orna is in as my performance analyst. She works as that for the LGFA on research projects. So she's bringing huge experience, I suppose, to that role, and great knowledge about what it takes to win. She's an All-Ireland club medal winner as well. So Orna will be down on Sunday for our first in-house game. And then on top of that, I have Sarah Cunningham and Caoimhe McMahon are with me as well in the backroom team. And I have a sports psychologist from Dublin, another woman. So there's 4 of them there, and you know, you could even see it last night at training, like that they were interacting with the girls, and the girls were really positive about it, and having that link between, we call them an FLO, a female liaison officer, but they're the girls as friends, that if they feel that they have issues, that they can go to them and come to us. You know, it works. They work really well as part of the setup, and it's just as important as anyone else in the setup.
And Evan, lastly, you mentioned there about the preparation time before league, and you mentioned about having an open. So I know, speaking to you past, you said about an open door this year in terms of players coming in and their opportunity. I'm just wondering, maybe in the league, I suppose you mentioned that there's no real chance to see inter-county games. Will you be basing your team on how the girls perform at training, or will you be look to say it's a blooding sort? We need that experience to start off, maybe get 1 or 2 wins under the belt as senior management and introduce the new young girls at time into it? Or will you be saying it's right, whoever puts their hand up for the jersey straight off the bat, you perform in your in-house game, you're going straight in without having
the league is quite interesting, Jim, because like you've Clare and Wexford who are in the intermediate, and in the league, and the rest are senior teams. And then and there's quite a big gap. You have the likes of Armagh in the league, Kerry in the league, who are mixing it right at the top level in ladies football. But then you go down to Division 3 and you've Kildare, Roscommon, Down, who beat them a point in the quarter final, and Roscommon got to their Ireland semi-final. So, like, for me, obviously I'd like a good run in the league, but we need to find players for the championship. And to me, I need to find 4 or 5 players that are going to come into the team. So we will be experimenting in the league by giving girls time. And look, the only way we'll see if girls are up for championship is when we go away to Kerry, when we go up to meet, and see, will they step up to the plate? And that's the challenge for them. Like, it's, if we want to be a senior team, we got to mix it with the senior teams. And I know Niamh O'Dea can do it at that level. I know Cueva Harvey can do it. I know Ellie O'Gorman can do it. But can we find some of this new panel of, we've trialists in, we've 35 of them in, and what I'm looking to see is, can I bring 10, 11 of them onto the panel, and more importantly, can they push them older girls to take their positions? Because competition is key in any panel to drive standards, and that's what we want to do. We want to make it hard. With a panel of 30, 35, make it, first thing you have to do is get into the match day 26, and from there, then them girls that are left at home on day 1, I want them to come back to train on Tuesday and be chomping at the bit to get into the panel the following day. And that's the only way we'll be successful, is if you don't put the head down when you don't make the squad for day 1, or you don't make the team. You kind of put your head down, you work hard, and we're all in it together. And look, we have a management team, I think, of we have a backroom team of 12 or 13 people, all volunteering for the betterment of Clare ladies football. And that's where, if we can put our time in, we expect the same from the girls to come to the standards that we're going to set. And that comes from the top, from the county board, who have set standards and got new sponsorship in, and really given us everything we've looked for. And we're all in it together, and that's what we're trying to feed into the girls.
And I suppose, lastly, I'll come around the table now for the last 30 seconds. I'll start with you, Seamus. Seamus, what would resonate a good league campaign for Colm Collins' charges and Evan Talty's charges?
Well, I suppose for Colm's charges in the football, obviously retaining the Division 2 status at a minimum, and obviously having use that to put a team together that will go to Killarney and let Kerry see that we're able to play football in Clare. That will, obviously, Kerry are going to be the hot favourites. There's no doubting that, or no arguing about that. But I think it was Evan mentioned at the start, the time has come, for Clare are going to have to be able to take on the Kerrys and the Corks and the big ones of this world. And, they have shown a couple of times in recent years that they have no fears of Cork now. And I'm not saying that they have fears of Kerry, but they're due a break against Kerry, and they're due to put one over on them. And there will be a bit of pressure on Kerry this year after being knocked out last year in the championship. So from that point of view, and for the ladies, I'd like to see them having a good league, but I think, following on from what Evan just said there, that the league will see them develop a team that will challenge strongly for the intermediate title, and maybe go that step or two further this year from last year's campaign.
And Nicholas, likewise, same question to you.
Yeah, well, I want to see, like Seamus said, I want to see Colm Collins doing well in the league, first and foremost, and I think they can beat all them 3 teams, and maintaining Division 2 is most important, but maybe even stepping up a little bit. But when you look back at last year and you saw what Tipperary did, and you saw what Kevin did, why not Clare? And I think what Evan said there, Kerry are vulnerable at the moment, and why not have, I'd love to see him going down after the league and really stepping up to the mark against Kerry. And as for the ladies football, what Evan said there, like getting them to play the Kilmurray way, and getting them to play, if I can see that, I definitely be delighted, and getting the team for the championship in the league, which I think is vital. He's a new manager, just send his authority on it now, and get them playing that way, and get those other girls that he's talking about, get them up to that level, And I think if I can see that, I'll be delighted as well and see progress. And what he's named out there, that team he named out of people, like he's a very professional approach there. Listen to him, and that bodes well for us in the ladies football.
And Evan, sort of slightly changed the question for you and your management. What would portray a good sort of league campaign for you? And obviously then what you think would be a good league campaign for Colm Collins' Chargers?
I think, to be honest, we're not too dissimilar in what we're looking for. I think, like, you never know with Columns. I'd be fairly confident, like, they probably could pull a couple. They need to pull one big result, and the other two, then they're probably, it's 50-50. So I'd be hoping that the boys will hit the ground running and could sneak a semi-final place. And really, as find 3 or 4 young, exciting talents that we can have a bit of optimism going down to Clarny or wherever it's going to be on, that we can give Kerry a rattle and not just, I suppose, go down to make out the numbers. So I'd be hoping that we get a good bounce from the league and bring about a momentum into the championship and lie in the grass for Kerry and hopefully do what Cork did to them and catch them when they're cold. And that's the time to catch them. And from our point of view, from the league, it's much the same. Look, we want to try and retain Division 2 status, but with the caveat that our main aim is championship this year, and it's finding new girls and blooding new girls. Because look, let's call a spade a spade. When you're bait 22 points in a semi-final, you have to go back to the drawing board. Like, obviously, what we produced last year is not going to be good enough to win in All-Ireland this year. So we're not kidding ourselves here that we need to step it up, meet the girls, and I've told the girls this, they need to have a hard look in the mirror. There's things that they can control in being fitter, faster, stronger. We've Michael Frawley, who was with Davy in Wexford as our S&C coach. We've left no stone unturned. So, like, that's where they need to get to join the likes of the Tipperaries and Meets at senior level. And for us, the league is a stepping stone to that.
Yeah. On that note, I would like to thank Evan Talty, the Clare's senior ladies football manager, for joining us. Renowned sports journalist Seamus Hayes, and sports analyst Nicholas Rynne. This is me, Jim Conlan, from the RCB Radio Sports Show, live at 92.5 and 94.8 FM and online at www.rcb. Just to note that this show will go out on our YouTube channel Friday night at 9 p.m. and it'll be also aired live next Monday night from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. on RCB West Clare Radio at 92.5 and 94.8 FM. But all for me, from Rhodes, is to say goodbye. We wish Colm Collins' Chargers the best of luck, and we also wish Evan Talty's Chargers the best of luck in their respective Allianz Leagues campaign. Good night and God bless.